Welcome to the Mets Pod. On today's show, we're pumped. Mets pitching coach Jeremy Hefner joins us. We're talking about the no-hitter, managing the pitching staff, the bullpen, and then after that, we're going to talk about the big-time roster moves that the Mets had to make. And as always, we're going to dive into the mailbag. So a reminder, subscribe to the Mets Pod at Apple Podcasts, Spotify, SNY's YouTube, or wherever you get your podcast. What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Mets Pod. We are really excited because today, Joe and I are joined by Mets pitching coach Jeremy Hefner coming off the massive no-hitter. Jeremy, do I even have to ask, how are things right now? How are you doing, man?
Yeah, I'm doing good. That was an exciting night. It's history, right? And I was fortunate enough to be here for Johans too, and so being a part of both no-hitters was, it's obviously something I'll never forget, and super happy for our group and for our team and for those guys that got to go out and do it.
Yeah, especially at Citi Field on a Friday night. The crowd was electric. Obviously, the pitching was even better. Let's get right into it. What was your reaction just experiencing that? Whether it's obviously the nerves, whether it's the pressure heating up that the fans are getting more and more excited, avoiding the letdown. Just what was your overall reaction? Especially, you said you saw Johans. That was one guy. This was a collective team effort, including James McCann calling and managing a lot of different arms.
Yeah, I think that's what makes the combined no-hitter pretty special, is you have to have, how many other guys throw in the game click all on the same day. Defense has to play really well. Nemo made that diving play in whatever it was, the third inning or whatever, like that saved the no-hitter. And so it was a true team effort. So in a lot of ways, the Johan one was very special because we'd never thrown one here. He did it at home. It was a packed crowd, like all that stuff. But I think the other night speaks more to this group and what kind of team that we have, and that shared responsibility to go out and try to win a ball game was exemplified on that night.
A lot of guys talked about not even knowing that a no-hitter was going while they're pitching. When did you actually kind of realize it was happening? And, when were you thinking like, oh, wow, this really a chance for a no-hitter here?
Yeah, I think, when you're in the coach, when you're in the dugout, talking to Buck and whoever the manager is, whatever team you're on, like the scoreboard dictates a lot of the decisions that are being made. So whatever the score is, those types of things. So you're constantly looking up at the scoreboard with the lineup, trying to figure out who we're going to bring in the game. Buck and the hitting coaches and Charles are trying to figure out if there's a pinch hitting option. So you're constantly looking up there. So I knew the whole game. I think once Drew got those 4 outs, and we were kind of through the heart of their lineup again, and we had to face them one more time. That's when I started to, and who we had available in the bullpen. I knew we had a chance. And then Sugar came out and was just electric. That may have been the best outing he's ever had as a Met, in terms of just completely overtaking the game. So pretty special.
So when managing a bullpen during a no-hitter, like you said, you were obviously hyper aware of it going on. Does that change how you manage the bullpen or manage the game at all? Or are you a little bit more aware of, okay, if a guy goes through 3 batters but he walks a guy, I might be a little bit more sensitive to a matchup that we like better here? Or do you just treat it like, hey, we got to win this game like any other?
Yeah, we got to win the game. That was the only thing on our mind. So yeah. I think if it was a 12-11 game or a 12-9 game, I think we're throwing the same guys based in that part of the lineup and what those the strengths of those hitters versus the strengths of our pitchers. And so for us, it didn't change. We knew we had a divisional opponent, and that was a big game for us, and that we had to win. Or not we had to win, but we certainly wanted to win and needed to win.
So you touched on Sugar, Edwin Diaz. What does this mean for him? This is our first opportunity as a Mets fan base, obviously, that we've seen him in a situation like that that's near playoff pressure. I know it's ridiculous to say when we're, in April, May kind of baseball games, but the intensity of the crowd that were behind him on every slider that dropped, it felt like it was roaring louder and louder. And it was honestly the best I thought he's ever looked. Flawless. You couldn't ask for more from a reliever. Just what did you think this moment was specifically for him?
Yeah, I don't know. I try not to get too wrapped up into one outing.
Yeah.
But what that night meant to fans, and to our group, and to Mets, to everyone in this associated with this organization, like for Edwin to go out and have that type of moment, was very special. And he's worked extremely hard, like all of our pitchers have. But he's had some bad outings in this uniform in the past, and like he's put a lot of those behind him. And it's tough kicking for a reliever sometimes. Like it's just the way it is. It's the nature of the job. Like sometimes you're going to go out there and you're going to feel great and you're going to get hit around, and then other times you're going to go out and you're like, I don't know how I'm going to get anybody out, and you punch out the side. So it's just a weird. You're always on, so for him to kind of like the stars align and to cap a no hitter, like it was a lot of fun to watch, and I was just so happy for him.
So let's take a step away from the no hitter for a minute and talk about just generally your job as the pitching coach. How advantageous do you think it is for your job as pitching coach to be a guy that's been there and done that as a big league starter?
That's a difficult question. I think everyone's experiences in life kind of shape, how they treat their job and how they treat the people around them and stuff like that. I think it certainly helps, because as I relate to the guys in the locker room, in some ways I'm the same age as them. I'm in the same lifestyle in terms of how old our kids are. And so that shared, I know what it feels like to stand 60 feet, 6 inches away from some of the best athletes on the planet. So I think it helps for sure. But, if a guy has never played in the big leagues or pitched in the big leagues and can help a player better their career, make more money, help their family out, whatever, like I think it's been my experience that most players are willing to accept that, just because like that's what it's about. It's about value creation for the player. If we can do that, then we're going to have a better team. We're going to win more games, and we're going to achieve our goals that we want to achieve at the end of the season.
What is it like managing so many, and I know you've been around superstar arms, you've pitched at the highest level, but now managing a wide array of superstar arms. And it's not just, obviously when Jake is back, and you've been around Jake a ton, but Scherzer, Bassett, young guys that are really on the rise like Megill, and their wide range of personalities. Like we see it from afar. We see after every outing for a youngster, Bassett is working with them. Scherzer is either talking to Buck, talking to Pete, talking to young players on the team. What is it like being around intense personalities that are in your starting rotation and in your bullpen?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's a fair question. So I don't think of it as managing. It's more, I just try to be as relational as I can. In a lot of ways, it's a dad-child relationship. Not to say that these guys are kids, but in the same way that like there's a flow that goes along with every type of personality, and knowing when to not say anything, and knowing when to not say anything and letting them be successful or fail, or whatever happens, or okay, I need to say something here. We need a correction. We need some accountability, whatever, like being sensitive to that, those two types of dynamics, and making sure I'm pushing the right buttons at the right time. That's my job. Hopefully, I feel like I've done a good job of that so far. And I think a lot of it has to do with, in whatever success that I've had, is that I am in similar circumstances as them from a lifestyle point of view. So there's a lot of shared experiences with me and our guys, and I'm not too far removed from being like a Megill, a young guy in the big leagues with my first taste and those types of things. So I'm not I'm not 30 years removed from that experience. And so I can relate to him. And, and that's how I try to approach every day is like, how can I get close to these guys and make sure that I'm doing everything in my power to help us be successful.
Quick follow-up before my next question. I want to ask specifically about Max Scherzer and how you handle him, because honestly, I'm just watching on TV as a fan. He scares the heck out of me, and I'm nowhere near him. So talk about kind of your experience with Max over the first, couple months of your relationship, because, man, he's intense.
Yeah, I think there's some I think I share some of that experience with you. There was a little bit of fear. I mean, the unknown, right? Like, you just don't know. You don't know until you've interacted with them, right? And I think with Max, it comes from an unbelievable competitive place. His energy it's all channeled towards winning, and that's it. Like whatever we need to do to win, create new pitches, create new mechanics, like whatever. Like he just wants to win, and I can appreciate that because we come from the same cloth now. Like my personality manifests itself a little different than Max, but in the same way, like we're both after the same things, and so that's where you can have a really good relationship with two different kind of personalities and make it work and make it thrive even.
When you came over from Minnesota, you were cited as a blend between old school and new school philosophies. The Mets have obviously made big investments on the analytical side since Steve Cohen took over as owner of the team. With that, do you find yourself kind of using more of the new school now that there's kind of more data and information available to you?
Yeah. It's tough. Like, I don't really like the old school, new school.
That's why I quoted.
Yeah. I saw their quote. It's like, it's all information. Like, we've used information in baseball for 120 years. Now the information has certainly changed, and the way that we go about gathering the information has certainly changed. But we have a really good analytics staff, our performance group from a biomechanics standpoint, how these guys prepare and how they can utilize the tools around them. I just want to be that person, that conduit to like include everyone, because I don't want to get in the way of something that might help our group win. My ego isn't so big that, everything's got to run through me, and if it doesn't run through me, then we're gonna have issues. Like no, like we all have this on, like we all have the orange and blue on. So like let's work together to again create value, right? Like that's what it's about. And if we can do that, then we win more ball games and we do the things that we want to do in October and November.
Focusing in on Tylor Megill, somebody that we've enjoyed his rise. I mean, a former 8th round pick, kind of came out of nowhere a little bit to the fan base and in general last year, had a really, really good start. And then we see him come back this year and big time improvement. It's not just on paper, right? It's not just the box score. It's the uptick in velocity. It's the maybe pitch selection, but mechanically. What is it, Jeremy, to you that we've seen a notable growth in his game? Is it one thing? Is it that velocity, or has he worked on a lot of different things to get here as a legitimate big league starter?
Yeah, I mean, we talked about analytics staff, our performance group, like our player development people. This is the player development win. They did an unbelievable job of helping Tylor move better, move more efficiently, which he was able to tap into his big frame and throw harder and use his. And they shaped the slider and they shaped the changeup and created this monster now, right?
Yeah.
And we've just been able to like kind of compound on that. Just making sure that he stays tuned up, much like a car. Like we got a Ferrari, now we just need to make sure the oil's changed consistently, checking the brakes, checking the air in the tires, like those types of things. I would just say, like, to answer your question specifically, it's certainly the velocity helps, but I think it even more so like his mentality and his demeanor. He doesn't get too high or too low. So like when things are going really well, he's the same guy. And if he has a bad start, like he's the ssame guy. And in our game, like in baseball, like it's a game of failure. Like you're going to fail at some point. So how do you react to that? Do you let it consume you and and then affect further outings down the road, or do you leave it as is, whether good or bad, and then tomorrow's a new day? And Tylor's done a really good job of that, and I think that's what's led to a lot of his successes so far early in his career.
So he's not pulling our leg, or it's not a bit. This is really how even-keeled he is. I mean, at some point I was like, man, this guy is such a pro with the New York media for such a youngster. There's no way he's always like this, but you're saying that is really him.
Yeah, Southern California chill, man.
There you go. Yeah, makes sense.
Last one for me. So a favorite of this podcast is Drew Smith. I know he's made changes to his repertoire, incorporating a slider a bit more than he had in the past, and the results have been fantastic so far. What have you seen with Drew this year, and is he someone you can envision kind of becoming an eighth inning option with, obviously, Lugo having, his ups and downs and Trevor going through what he's going through? Do you think Drew Smith's a guy that could step up potentially into that role?
Certainly. Yeah, Drew definitely has the stuff. He has the mentality. He has a growing experience. The slider helps him. We're working on some sort of like changeup or split or something he's already thrown the changeup. It's a pitch that he wants to improve and have three quality pitches that he can fire. He's a hard worker. He's a blue collar guy. He wants to get after people, and he certainly has all the intangibles in the repertoire to do that.
Jeremy Hefner, man, we were excited when we heard you were coming back to put on the blue and orange and be a part of the coaching staff, and we were even more excited to have you on this show. Thank you so much, man, and best of luck the rest of the season.
All right, thanks, guys. I appreciate it.
All right, awesome stuff from Jeremy Hefner, and a reminder here, you are listening to the Mets Pod. Subscribe to the Mets Pod at Apple Podcasts, Spotify. You can watch a little bit on SNY's YouTube and also see where our clips are posted there on SNY's social media or wherever you get your podcasts. All right, Joe, a big week here, and it's not just coming off the no-hitter. Obviously, we've been bracing for roster decisions for a long time. I think it was truly up in the air for quite a bit, but the Robinson Cano era in New York with the Mets is over. I'll just kick this thing right over to you, Joe. Money, obviously, a lot owed to him over the next 2 years, but baseball reasons, this had to be the right decision, correct?
Yeah, we talked about it last week, and I thought it was, the right decision then, but it was one of those things that I would believe it when I see it, because they did have guys that could get optioned. And more often than not, when you have the choice to option someone to AAA versus take someone completely out of the organization, you tend to lean the former. But I thought it was a good baseball decision, and to be honest, when you looked at Billy Epler's quote from yesterday, talking to Steve Cohen, and Steve Cohen said, make the right baseball decision. The reality is Robinson Cano is getting that money regardless, and the Mets are in a position where they're playing great baseball, they're in first place, and you have to make sure you have the best possible roster you can to continue that success. And we talked about it last week. Cano, the bat looks slow, he's not moving very well out in the field, and he was never much of a base runner anyway. So it kind of felt like he was a square peg in a round hole, so to speak, on this roster. And, I think it was a logical baseball move, and they'll have to deal with whatever clubhouse things that they're going to miss out with on Cano. But the best cure for any potential clubhouse issues is winning baseball games. That much we know.
Yeah, in this era of Mets baseball, that is what matters, right? It's winning above all else. And you heard it even Jeremy Hefner saying how Scherzer operates. Obviously, it's anything it takes to win. It's probably a big reason why Max Scherzer is here after aligning with Steve Cohen, knowing that from top to bottom of this organization, winning is what comes first, second, and third. So I think when you look at it too, obviously this is a decision that allows them to keep Dom Smith on the roster, had a 4-for-4 game recently. I don't think that impacted the decision the next day, but it was still great to see Dom have his breakout performance of the season. Keep J.D. Davis. Obviously, guys that hit on different sides of the plate can be bench bats, can DH when needed. As much as Dom is obviously a good glove at first base, he's shown to be a surprisingly capable glove in the outfield when nobody expected him to be able to last out there. So J.D. Davis, he's been getting a little more time in the field lately. It always made sense to keep those guys. I think there's more upside with those guys. Younger guys, we know JD can hit for power when things are clicking with him. We know Dom can hit gap to gap when things are clicking for him. And obviously, there's just more on the table there for what they can bring with Cano. It felt like it was just over. And I'll say this, Joe, and I kind of want to kick this to you. This is looking way, way far ahead. Making this decision now obviously allowed them to keep Dom and JD on the roster. I think the Mets might reach a trade deadline where this is obviously a good lineup, but we've talked about for a long time, maybe need one more power bat. And that doesn't need to be a everyday kind of bat. Could even be a bench bat. If they got to the trade deadline and adding a guy that is truly a bench bat, not there for defense, not there for speed, a true power bat off the bench, you can't have Cano on this roster then either, because the only reason you kept him was for the potential that he is the same offensive guy we've seen throughout his career. And it felt like that had finally fallen off a cliff. It was the last thing to go, but even that looks like it just wasn't going to happen this year.
Yeah, I mean, there's certainly a chance that Robinson Cano latches on with another team and gets kind of that contact ability back, and you see him maybe hit for some decent average, a little on base, but the power is sapped, in my opinion. I just don't think the power's there at all anymore, and, Father Time has caught up to everybody except Tom Brady. That's kind of just the way it works. So, yeah, I think Cano kind of lost the power there a bit, and yeah, I think it puts him in a position, like you said, as we get to the trade deadline, power might be one of the prime targets for this team outside of bullpen.
All right, looking ahead, obviously the bullpen, bit of an up and down year so far. We've seen really good stuff from Edwin Diaz, Drew Smith, who we talked about earlier, but now one of their high leverage guys who has been struggling this year, and it appears he is banged up, he is hurt. He might be out even for a little bit of time, and Trevor May. It's a big hit, Joe. We know Lugo can hold down 8th innings, but you always need that other guy. And May was somebody that had flexibility to pitch the 7th inning, had flexibility to pitch the 8th inning. He was brought here on a 2-year deal for pretty good reliever money. Last year he had his ups and downs, but overall solid. This year it just has not worked out. It feels like at a minimum right now, he needs to get his body right. But obviously as well, the trickle effect of this is, who's next up? Is it going to be Drew Smith? Do you have to go out and be proactive already in May and get a bullpen arm? And I don't know what you trade for that, what the cost of that is, if there are people available. But Joe, this is a big situation for a team that, for how great they've been awesome. There have been moments this year where they've struggled to hold leads or keep games tied from the bullpen.
Bullpens are going to be up and down. There's ebbs and flows throughout a season very volatile. That's kind of just how it works. But in regards to Trevor May, as of this recording, we don't know the results of the MRI that he said he was going to get. So, like you said, it could be an IL stint in his future where, he gets a break, because he said he's not 100% healthy from his triceps soreness that he had earlier in the season. So to me, maybe he's a guy that you look at and throw him on the IL, give him a couple weeks off, and then let's revisit and see where he's at. Because, he is susceptible to the long ball historically, but it feels like this year it's been even more than previously. So I think an IL stint is good for him. As far as acquiring any help, there are some rumors out there that San Diego is shopping Dinelson Lamet, who was a starter and is now being converted to a reliever off Tommy John. His results haven't been so great yet this year, but that's another guy that you get in the hands of Jeremy Hefner, and maybe you could turn something into him. As far as minor leagues, if you need to call somebody up, it's a little tough. Eric Orzi's a guy that I like, but he hasn't performed yet this year. Colin Holderman, who we saw in spring training, has looked okay. And kind of a sneaky sleeper, he's in Double-A, and he's been pretty dominant so far, is Bryce Montez de Oca. Former 9th-round pick that's had a myriad of injuries, but he's pumping up to 101 with a mid-90s cutter. He's been closing games for Double-A Binghamton, so just kind of a name to keep on your... Yeah. Oh, and he throws so hard, sometimes his hat comes off. Like, he throws his hat off his body. Montez de Oca is a trip, but just a name to kind of keep on your radar. Certainly, you need an uptick in performance, like you said. If May is going to go on the shelf for a bit, you look at Drew Smith, of course, favorite
Hasn't
of this
given up a run.
Hasn't given up a run. And Chasen Shreve is a guy that I think quietly, like, we were worried about the replacement for Aaron Loop, Chase and Shreve has quietly been fantastic for this team. It just kind of goes under the radar. But yeah, I think those are the two that stand out to me that need to step up. And, if there's someone from the minors, it's probably one of those couple names.
All right, so here's my off the rails idea. I have to throw one of these at you. You're usually the guy that can reel me back in. What is the value here of, we know the rotation right now: Scherzer, Bassett, Megill, Carrasco, Walker. Peterson obviously has been a flex starter. DeGrom is out. We don't know when DeGrom is going to be back. We've kind of put that out of sight, out of mind for the temporary. What's the better plan? Is it to keep Peterson working long innings here because in case of injury, in case he needs to make these doubleheader starts, whatever it may be, but he's going to be flexed back and forth between AAA and the Mets? Or at some point, is there value in him as a 2-inning high-leverage reliever, especially a lefty? Am I crazy for even considering that at this point?
No, I don't think you're crazy for considering it. I think for this stage of the season, I would keep him stretched out, and you could shuttle him back and forth as he's needed to start games. I mean, there's double headers and things like that where you're gonna need him. But if we get later in the season and things are going well in the rotation health-wise and performance-wise, like you can look at August, September, where you say, hey, Peterson, you're now more valuable for the rest of this season as that 2-inning, 3-inning reliever and another lefty. Yeah, and playoff run. Like, I think at that point you look at it as that's probably where he's more valuable for the remainder of the season. But given the kind of dearth of starting pitching depth in this organization, I think for now the best plan is keep him starting. And if that means he's taking the express from Syracuse to Queens every so often,
poor guy,
then so be it. But you do have the option limit now, so that's something to consider as well. Starting now, you can only option a player 5 times for the rest of the season. So the old Jacob Rames, that's a heck of a lot. He had frequent flyer miles because back then it was Vegas to New York, but he was going back and forth seemingly every other day. Now you're limited to 5, so that adds a little bit of strategy to what you can do decision-wise.
Yeah, Peterson's short-term or long-term future might actually align with the chance of DeGrom coming back, right? If you think DeGrom is coming back into the rotation, that might be time that you could start to use Peterson more in that 2-inning relief role. All right, let's get into the mailbag. As always, as promised, we got 2 killer questions today, and they are from 2 old-school listeners of the pod. The first one is from Nathan Hirsch, who said, do you think this type of offense, few extra base hits, good on-base percentage, and base running, is sustainable in today's game? It used to work just fine, but that was before everyone was throwing 95 miles an hour, defensive inning, positioning, and shifts, etc. So it's a good question from Nathan Hirsch here, Joe, because the Mets are winning in ways that we are not used to watching the Mets win. And at the end of the day, they are winning a lot, and they are scoring enough runs, and they are running the bases super aggressively. There's no denying that. And they're putting the ball into play. Sustainable? That might be tough. I think this is a team that's going to have to show a little more power. But why I'm cautiously optimistic here, Joe, is because I think we really haven't seen Pete and Escobar get going with the power bat yet. And that's not a will they, it's a when they.
I think we both agree that they could use some more thump in the lap. We mentioned that a couple minutes ago, and we've talked about that in prior episodes as well. That's obviously a bit of a future problem. But I'm personally a fan of zigging when everyone else is zagging. Like right now, team building throughout baseball has turned towards those 3 true outcomes: walk, strikeout, home run. Well, what did the Oakland A's do in the early 2000s? They
got on base.
They went for on-base percentage. They went for things. So to me, I actually think it's quite sustainable. Their hard hit rate probably needs to increase a bit because they're bottom of the pack there. But I would say pitch recognition is one of the most consistent things. Like Brandon Nimmo is going to see the ball well almost all the time. That's not really a trait that goes up and down. Contact ability, just being able to put the ball in play, that's something that's sustainable. Base running, as long as you have the same coaches out there pushing the same message and players Joey Greenlight, as long as you have that and you have players willing to do it, I think it's actually quite a sustainable model. They'll need to obviously improve the power, which, like I said, probably a trade deadline deal. But I think the way they're operating on the offensive side of the ball, are traits that don't really go through peaks and valleys. And I think it's just going to lead to less variance in results and less massive peaks and massive valleys.
Here's my I wish I had access to this advanced data theory out there. The Mets being an on-base team, especially with Nimmo and Cano working counts, and even Guillorme when he plays, being an on-base team, being a team that puts the ball in play, obviously getting a lot of hits, it feels like, Joe, that they are making starters work a little harder early in games. And in theory, a lot of the times, and once again, I'd love to know the advanced data on this if they are actually one of the teams leading in this category. It feels like they're getting to bullpens earlier. Am I crazy for thinking that? And they capitalize on bullpens. They always have.
It feels that way, and that's a perfectly sound strategy. Work up the starter's pitch count, get to the bullpen, because on average, outside of the late inning relievers are worse pitchers than starting pitchers. Like that's just, especially the lower end of the bullpen. So if you're able to get these starters out in the fourth and the fifth at a semi-consistent level, then you're setting yourself up to put your good hitters against their worst pitchers more often than not. And over a 3-4 game series, you're now tiring out those arms and giving them less options that they can use in future dates. So yeah, I think all in all, they're zigging while the rest of the league is zagging. And I think it's one of the more sustainable approaches that you could have in modern day baseball.
All right, the last question for the mailbag for today's show is from longtime listener Steve Miller, who said, who is your odds-on favorite to be taken number 1 overall in the draft at this point? Joe, sneaking in a little early draft talk before we get into the heat of summer. What are you thinking for the first overall pick? Is there a consensus, or is this going to be like the NFL draft where it's completely up in the air down to the wire?
In the spirit of NFL draft season, I figured let's get a start here on the MLB draft. And as far as from my perspective, I think there's a clear-cut number 1 player in this class, and that's Drew Jones, the son of Braves legend Andrew Jones. He is a 5-tool type center fielder, has a batting stance just like his pops, can play center field like his pops. I think he's probably one of the better number 1 overall prospects that I've seen in probably the last 5 years or so in the draft. Like, to me, he's very special. And there's a couple other names that'll be in play because if you follow the MLB draft, signability plays into it. And sometimes teams want to go under slot early so they can go over slot later and pay some high school kids. So keep an eye on Jackson Holliday, a high school shortstop from Oklahoma, who conveniently enough is the son of Matt Holliday. So it is a big year this year for former big league sons at the top of the MLB draft. And just to kind of give an outline of where this draft is comparing to last year's draft, I get asked this a lot, especially with the Mets getting that extra first-round pick for not signing Kumar Rocker. I think this draft has a lot more depth than last year's draft does. So I think the Mets, especially you also have the pick that they got for Noah Syndergaard signing with the Angels. They're slated to have 5 of the first 90 picks or so in the draft. It's an opportunity for this scouting department led by Tommy Tanis and Mark Tremuta to really put an influx of youth in this system and pitching too, which it's going to be a little tough in the first round if you're looking for college pitching. But there's a lot of high school arms. I mean, Dylan Lesko, he underwent Tommy John recently, but I had him as a no doubt top 5 player in this class. Are the Mets willing to take a shot on a guy off Tommy John in the mid-first round that otherwise they would have had no chance to see? So it's going to be interesting to see how the Mets opt to address the draft this year. But up at the top, for me, it's Drew Jones. But, we certainly have another 2 or 3 months before, but let's get people familiar with some names that they need to know.
And I'll say this, when you have 2 first-round picks in the middle of the draft, Joe, maybe that opens up the door that you're a little bit more lenient with a guy coming off Tommy John with one of the picks. You're swinging for the fences on upside with one, and then maybe you're taking a little bit more of a high floor player with that other first-round pick. So the Mets going to be a really exciting team to watch for the draft this year. All right, Joe, fun show. Jeremy Hefner jumping on was awesome, especially coming off the no-hitter. Closing thoughts as the Mets head into some gigantic divisional games over this next week.
Awesome interview with Jeremy Hefner, so really appreciate him taking the time to talk to us about a myriad of subjects. And yeah, big series here with Atlanta and, big games coming up. So the Mets just got to keep this train rolling. 7 series in, 7 series won. let's just keep it going. Let's go 8 for 8, and then look at 9 for 9, and we'll just take it a day at a time.
Pedal to the metal. All right, reminder, subscribe to the Mets Pod at Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. We'll catch you next week.